Hello, welcome back. Another video on the Stag carbs. It's the last one in this series. So part one, really cope with fault finding, stripping the carbs down. Part two is about rebuilding the carbs back up using a Stag Stromberg kit and also baselining them, so setting them up properly. And this part is all about getting it all running again. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, give it a thumbs up. No Smurfy fingers today. I've got the thermals on because it's blooming cold. If you don't like it and you can't turn it off, if you want to contact me, churchhouseclassics, it's all one word, at gmail.com. If you fancy supporting the channel in any way, because I've helped you, amused you, inspired you, then there's a PayPal me link thing strolling along the bottom here. All donations are gratefully received. Thank you very much to everyone who has donated to the channel. Much appreciated. Anyway, enjoy the video. Okay, carbs are back on. Right, now, one thing you will need, by the way, and I forgot to mention it, these O-rings, they sit underneath the carb pedestal and on top of the inlet manifold. These things, as soon as they touch fuel, swell up. I guess it's what they're designed to do, just to fill the gap and seal in the air leak. So every time you remove the carb pedestal from the inlet manifold, you need a new one of these, because they do not fit after you've used them once. They are rubbish. Now, looking now at fuel lines, more amusings, more amusants. I'll balance you up there. How about that? Fuel line obviously runs along the chassis, and then up. We've got some fuel line here, which is listed as multi-fuels, Gates Automaster 8mm, multi-carburant, blah 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 blah. Also, just spilling a bit of fucking. Look at the state of that filter. I might change the filter as well while I'm at it. But there was nothing securing it onto the pipe at all. Not only that, we're down here. Look at that. I'll just pull it off. That's how tight it was, and it's right underneath the connection here for the Parental. God's sake. And then, as we start digging through and looking at other parts of the fueling system, we've got some very dubious pipework here. So what I'm going to do, I've got really, I tend to buy this stuff about 10 meters at the time. This stuff is ethanol friendly fuel line. It follows whatever standard it is. Where are we? I think I bought it from Car Builder Solutions. Now it should fit over that. I'm rather hoping it will fit over this. Just it will fit over there with a clip to hold it in place, so that's good. We can get rid of all this crap, I think. I mean, that filter certainly has seen better days. I'll just check if I've got another one. I should have. And then really it's just a case of running the fuel line down to each of the carburetors. One thing you need to watch out for, by the way, and I fell for this mistake with Giles the Stag's car, the Pro Bonio project. The air filter arms come down here. It's quite easy to trap the fuel line underneath. I thought it wasn't trapped. It was trapped enough that it was restricting the flow of fuel to the carburetor. And so that's kind of one gotcha there to remember. I tend to use the double E crimps when I'm crimping this stuff together. I mean, look at that. I mean, it looks like a mouse has been gnawing at it. I mean, rather than cutting it, maybe they just chewed it off. Right, enough slagging off Cameron's car here. We're not slagging off Cameron's car. What we're doing is we're slagging off previous mechanics installation work around the fuel lines. So what I'll do is I will replace all of these. I don't like it as well when they don't straighten out. I mean, that's a tired fuel line. Probably fine. If I bent that back on itself, it is starting to craze. It's tired. It's tired and it's old. So I'll cut the T-piece out. I'll salvage the clips, although I might use double E clips to hold this stuff on. I just find them a little bit more secure than Jubilee clips. You should really use fuel clips. Fuel clips have a clamp that goes right the way around and they tighten the whole hose equally, whereas a Jubilee clip tends to just pull the hose from the top. Great for large bore hoses like cooling hoses and so forth, less good for fuel hoses because they tend to crimp and squash rather than clamp tight. Right, so I've got a big pile of those. I need to go and see if I've got a fuel filter somewhere. Now, one thing we haven't checked on this yet is the pressure on the fuel system isn't too much. I'm surprised fuel's going through that, in all honesty. I'll cut it open later on. Rotate it around. Stroke button work. Come on, Stroke. Right, back to where we were before. There we go. Right, so this is the finished product. It's all up and running, but I thought, for some reason I didn't video it. But anyway, what I'll do is I'll just quickly go through the process of tuning these things up, because it ain't difficult. There are some basic tools you're going to need, and I'm going to have to assume that you've been through and correctly baselined the carbs and they are in good working order. Because unless you've baselined the carbs and unless they're in good working order, I don't know what's going on with your carburetors. But as you can see, carburetors where the discs were installed upside down and the diaphragms weren't installed correctly were running horrifically rich. One carb was running lean, one carb was running horrifically rich, and as a result the car ran like a dog. Well, it didn't run like a running dog, it ran like a three-legged dog. Tripod, we're going to call him. But anyway, it runs beautifully now. Same carbs, just an overhaul kit. Now, what tools did I use? Well, nothing really that specialist, oddly enough. First and foremost, unless your ignition timing is on the nail, you are not going to get the carbs tuned up properly. So you need to make sure your ignition timing on the Stag 12 to 14 degrees before top dead centre on the European models. I don't know what it is in the US models, because they've got vacuum retard or whatever, I don't know. But that's just a standard, basic, bog standard timing. Like, it hasn't got the dial in on the back that tells you 12 degrees, so it just works against the timing marks. That's that. Next thing I use, and this is a vintage piece of treasure, this is, I sniped this off eBay. You can get these things around and about. There's a number of the mechanical not micrometers, what are you talking about, multimeters that will do much the same sort of thing. In fact, this one's very slightly out on the scale. Look at that, it's reading 100 RPM. I must have jogged it. Let's just change that quickly. I guess it depends on the temperature it's being used in. Basically, because the gauges on the dash are electrical on a Stag and they should not be trusted. Let's put a little light on here as well, shall we? The gauges on the dash are electrical and should not be trusted. I tend to use something like this, which connects across the battery and then to the coil negative, and it gives you an accurate indication of the RPM the engine's doing. Now, if you're running points as well, then press that button there, and you can check the dwell angle. Oh, there we are. Dwell RPM. It's very sticky today because everything's so fucking cold. That's why. Right. So that's one useful thing that I use, is just a tacho dwell. This one's from Snap-on. I've got other devices. I think Draper, or some of the guys out there, the colour tune guys, they've done a very basic dwell or tacho, and all it's doing is it's just measuring the signal, the trigger that comes off the top of the coil. Piece of cake that. So that's one device that I use, although it looks expensive. I think that cost me about 20 quid. Next thing you need a synchrometer. Now there's various different types available, including tubes with bubbles of air and shit like that in it. This is the one that I get on with the best. It is a synchrometer. It's made in Germany. There are versions that are made on the other side of the planet, and I don't tend to favour them that much. I have had problems with cheaper versions of this model, which is why I went for the original. I think it's a Del Auto, this one. Anyway, the idea is that this tells you how much air is being drawn through the throat of the carburettor, and as long as both carburettors are drawing the same amount of fuel, you know they're balanced. And the last thing that I use, again, another nice little eBay snipe, but you don't need this whole kit. All you need is the tool to adjust the Stag carburettor mixture, and that's this fella here. You need that little fella there. Okay, so that's really, in essence, the only tools I'm using here. All of this stuff is available used old stock, which is what I prefer, on eBay. You can get brand spanking new stuff. If you want to buy from China, buy from China. I don't mind. I can't do anything about it anyway. This was made in Canada, look at that. This one was made in Germany. This was probably made somewhere in Canada. Made in Italy, there we are. Made in Italy. And this would have been made in China. There you go. So I'm completely multinational here with my workshop tools. Right, now let's balance you here. What can you see? You can see the carburetors. Right, so before you even think about starting the engine up, what you need to do is to make sure that these rods are correctly set up, so that at rest the throttle is closed, so there's no tension on the throttle. It's pointless having one throttle closed and the other throttle being half open like that. They need to be kind of, just get the throttle disc so they're both loose. By popping the disc off in the resting place, popping the connector off in the resting place, you can see really how to get these lined up. So rods is the first thing. The next thing I do is the carbs. Sorry, the carbs. It's the rich adjustment, the rich mixture adjustment, the choke module, whatever. You've got two chokes on the Stag carburetors. This is one on each carb. I don't know why. On the Range Rover version of these carbs, there's a single choke module on this carb and a pipe that goes across to this carb. I don't know why it's different on the Stag car at all. I've got no idea. But anyway, there are two choke modules, there are two cables, and all I really do is just set the choke with the cable to make sure that the chokes are both springing into the off-closed position, and as soon as I start to pull on the cable, I can see that it's starting to open both at the same time. That's all I really do with those. You've got the big breather pipes, this fella here that goes down to the top of the engine. This is the important bit that stops you blowing all the oil out of all the various seals around your car, because it connects directly up to the inlet over there. Connect those up. Don't worry about these breathers up here. Don't worry about those breathers down there. Don't worry about the inlet manifold. You can run it without the inlet manifold on it. Obviously don't run it in a dusty environment with the inlet manifold off it, but for the purposes of tuning, really it's just a case of running it like that. In the video that comes up, you can see me messing around with the distributor, and basically what had happened was I could not rotate the distributor body enough on the base plate to achieve the kind of the desired ignition timing, which is on this I've set it to 14 degrees before top dead center, because that was the swing point. It would go so far and it wouldn't go any further, and for some reason the ignition timing on this car was set to about 20 something. It was off the scale. In fact, what's the scale? Yeah, it's a good centimetre off before top dead centre. So it's probably about 30 something degrees before top dead centre. I don't know how it even ran. So getting the distributor into the right location, where the vacuum advance points that direction towards the driver's side wiper, and the rotor points towards the nearest bolt, is the easiest way that I can do it. The manual says towards the furthest bolt. I've never managed to get an engine started pointed towards the furthest bolt. For some reason it always works for me pointing towards the nearest bolt. Maybe it's my cross eyes, I don't know. So once you've got the ignition timing right, you've got the carbs baselined and set up, and the engine is running, really you need to kind of just let it warm up a little bit so you've got the choke in. Now, one of the problems with these things, these carburetors, no fuel return, and also the fact it's a carburetor, you leave them idling for a long period of time, then it will slowly, milliliter by milliliter, flood the inlet manifold. So really, I tend to warm them up with the air filter on, and basically just driving them down the road. Just warm the car through properly, running up and down the revs and getting them good. You're not going to do any real damage to it because with the baseline settings that I've demonstrated, you're not running overly rich. If anything, you're running just slightly too lean. So it won't do damage there. When I am testing the carburetors, I make sure that the vacuum advance is in, I make sure the 2 breather pipes are on, I make sure that the little stub on the front of the carburetors down there, which connects onto the bottom of the air filter box, I make sure that's plugged up with a bolt. Because you don't want any vacuum or air leaks in there. It's going to give you a false negative, false positive, whatever way you want to look at it. And then really, the first thing I would do, I would leave it running at a baseline mixture setting, and then I'd use the syncrometer on each of the carbs and adjust the carbs by using the throttle idle speed controls. This little flathead screw, one down there and one here. This is the slave carburetor in this particular instance because everything seems to be driven off that one. So I tend to set that one first, back this one right off, and then dial this one back in just so it touches, and then check the sync. So basically you've got the same amount of air being drawn between each of the carbs. After about, I don't know, 45 seconds to a minute of idling, I tend to give it a good old blip up to 2000 RPM just to clear the excess fuel from the inlet manifold. Just hold it, it just clears any potential flooding. Then it's a case of doing the mixture. Now, I don't go berserk when I do mixture on these things. These things aren't tested at the MOT testing station to make sure they're 1.5% CO or whatever. The book states 4.5% CO on this. And typically how you would do that, use a screwdriver. But with the engine running, you want to lift up the piston inside the carb throat. At idle, ideally you want the revs to just slightly dip, but then recover as you're holding. You only hold it the width of your finger up. Sorry, the thickness of your finger that way. It's about half an inch I tend to go up, centimetre. Now, if the revs don't dip and the revs stay constant, it's probably just a little bit too rich. So you just wind the carburetor back, quarter of a turn, anti-clockwise, so clockwise or clockwise. So anti-clockwise to weaken it, clockwise to enrichen it. By doing both carburetors at the same time, you're kind of maintaining a baseline. Now, I appreciate that one carburetor may need to be running a little bit richer than the other, but we've rebuilt these and we're fairly comfortable and confident that they're in good order and they're both working. So I tend to do both carburetors exactly the same. And when you've finally got to the point where you've got the synchrometer on both sides working, I'm probably rambling now, Richard. So when you lift the piston up, if the revs dip and it stalls, it's running too lean. So then all I would do, put the tool into the top here. When I'm tuning it up, I don't tend to have these fitted at all. There's no oil in there, no nothing. Put the tool in there and rotate it. If it stalls instantly, I'll rotate it half a turn. But if it just kind of dips and then stalls, I'll rotate it a quarter of a turn, clockwise, just to give it a richer mixture. Work on both carburetors. Okay, so if I do this one quarter of a turn richer, I'll do that one quarter of a turn richer. And the idea really is to get both carburetors so that when you lift the piston, the revs dip, but it doesn't stall, and then it returns back to a normal idle again. That's ideal. I tend to have it so it dips, doesn't quite stall. Probably running at about 4% CO in. So that's the way you've done the car. Once you've done the mixture, then you go back onto the synchrometer, checking the airflow and adjusting, because as you adjust the mixture, then the airflow will change. So adjust the synchrometer again, get the carbs balanced up. And then when you've got it sweet, you'll know, because it will sound completely different. You'll think, shit, that's working really nicely. Now, there is a mixture trim screw down here, just forwards of the, or just the other side of the temperature compensator. I tend to just wind that in until it just touches and then leave it. I've never actually played with it, never done anything more with that than just kind of wind it until it just touches and then leave it. And it seems to work. I've never had a problem with the carbs yet. The other thing I forgot to mention is when you attach the throttle cable here there's a gap on the leading edge. It's in the manual. What I do is I get a 2mm drill bit and I put it through between the gap and then pull the cable so I have got kind of the 2mm amount of play. And I think basically when you open the throttle up, it's got that much movement, 2mm, before it starts to open both throttles up. All right, it just gives you a little bit of slack. And I guess it just needs it so that once the cable's going to be too tight, and then what will happen is the cable's too tight, and you end up with a hot day or a cold day, the cable shrinks or expands, it's going to hold the throttle open. Don't want that, I guess. So anyway, it's just good practice. Just set that 2mm. That's really about it, really, on these things. They are a piece of cake to set up. I don't know why people struggle with them. I think people struggle because they've probably got a bad set of carbs to start off with and they need a refurbish. As you've seen in the video already, these carbs, they have been badly assembled and the baseline wasn't right on them. So just getting them set up, and on this particular pair of carbs, from it starting with correct ignition timing to it running how I wanted it to do, I think it was just half a turn to enrich in each of these carburetors, and obviously the bulk of the work was around getting them balanced on using the synchrometer. But that's it on this. It's running sweet. Owner's collecting it tomorrow, so we'll wave goodbye to Mr. Stag. I hope it's been useful. The issues I've got are that the ignition timing is several million miles out. It's you know, as it, I was testing it, bearing in mind I haven't touched the distributor, aside from replacing the cap. It was off the scale. It was off the scale on the front of the engine, so it's like running about 25 degrees before top to centre, which is not ideal, really, is it? So then I tried to adjust it so it's actually running at the correct degree, and basically the distributor's gone in wrong. Can't make it up. Let's get this bolt out, which is still rather warm down here. It is still rather warm. Oh yes. That's out. Now basically what I want to do is to lift the distributor body out and put it back in with the vacuum advance rotated further around, like that. But you can't, Richard. Why can't you? Like that. Is that going in? It's not going onto the hex drive again. So we need to dig the hex drive out again, because it's being particularly irritating, I'm afraid. It's probably because it's all a little bit shagged out. There's the hex drive. There's the hex drive. Let's go back down again. Oh, torch, fuck off. Right, now, rotate, so we're just now is that hex drive actually going to drop down? No, see, it isn't, and this is the problem. I think this is part of the problem we've got here, is that the hex drive needs to rotate just a smeg, and then I think then I'll be all in order, because then I'll have the adjustment that I need. So that's the position that I need. So with the advance pointing towards the back, and then that's about the firing position for number 2, and then the distributor needs to move in that sort of arc rather than over here. So why is that hex drive not going onto the oil pump? It has. It's just gone on. Just wiggling it up and down has allowed it to go on. Right, so now, let us now, because the bolt now is towards the rear end of the slot, not the leading edge of the slot. Put my bolt back in again. So all I've done is really just rotated the distributor around on its drive. Oh, where did that just go to? Oh, it's down there. Like that. And then with this, oh for fuck's sake, you fucking fuck. With this done, I should then be able to tune the car. The book says 12 degrees before top dead centre. It really does depend on that sweet spot. I've kind of run them at 14, 12, 14, thereabouts. I generally find them to be sort of like, you know, quite happy at that sort of. It's wherever the smooth spot is fairly close to 12. And obviously when these things were running 12 degrees before top dead centre, we had things like 5-star available. If you don't know what 5-star is, or you think it's a modern pop combo, then I'm sorry folks, I'm an old fart. Right, let's just do this nut up. Nut. Let's do this bolt up, Richard. Now for some reason this thread is not the best on here. It's got a tight spot on it. I'm rather hoping now we are going to be able to at least time the ignition on this thing. So set it roughly in the midpoint of that. It's familiar because the clip gets stuck behind the hose clip over there. Push your cap back on. I need to refit the timing marks onto the front cover. I removed them because of having to crank the engine over. Right, that's on. Let's leave it about there. I'll put the coil lead on because otherwise we'll forget. Sort of thing I would forget as well. That's that. Now, down here, we've got the timing mark. Instead of using a short bolt, why don't we just put a shitload of fucking washers on it? Right, battery on. Right. Oh. Started kicking up there. I'll go to the chain. Right, that's where it wants to be. So there is, that's 8. That's too far. About there. I mean, I've done nothing with these carbs yet. That there. Tighten that up. Valve gear makes a lot of noise in this engine. Tighten that. Let's go to the side. That's okay. Oh. Right. Got a dip now. I'll get that. Brilliant. Oh, fishing around all day. Put the other bolt on the base plate. should have been a 3-minute job. I set the ignition time, it's turned into an hour and a bit long palaver. Put the distributor back into the engine in the right position, in the right place. Right, that's just running at a baseline carb setting. Right, that's all right. Sounds nice though. It does sound nice. What we do need to do here is put the ignition coil back in. It's trapped down there. I've taken the battery. Battery's disconnected. Sorry, put my teeth in. Take that off there. Take that down there. It goes on there, and then there. I'm going to put the bolt here, which is going to be an absolute fucking put in. I'll do it when I get back. It's cool. Down a little bit down there. Right. How about that? That, believe it or not, is pretty much all I had to do. Lower the idle speed, because I want to get the idle speed down to 700 to 750, which it is. Enriched each carburettor. So each carburettor turned it up about 3/4 of a turn. That's it. It might be running just a smeg rich, but that is as sweet as a nut. Nice. Right, put the air filter back on now. I was